Hey everyone, welcome to the Restoration Podcast, a podcast of hope and healing. Listen as we hear real stories told by real people. Our prayer is that these conversations bring encouragement to your life.
Good. Today we got our DYD of Iowa with us, Ryan Yates, and I'm very excited about this conversation that we're going to have. We're going to ask Ryan some questions, get to know him, get to know his calling, when it all started, his time in youth ministry, his time that he's been the DYD in Iowa here, and just get to know him a little better and see how he's been doing. So, how you doing?
Man, I'm doing well. I'm so excited to be here. Thank
Good.
you for inviting me. Thank you for asking me to be here. It's a privilege and an honor for sure.
It's good. It's a good time to be here. I actually was really excited when I found out that you were going to be with us, because I was like, I got to interview somebody else before, but I was excited to interview the DYD. So,
Well, it's NextGen Director now, not DYD anymore. We got to get the
NextGen Director.
Yeah, got to get that AG lingo down pat.
Yeah, I didn't come from the AG, so I'm a little outsider.
Hey, we'll learn you.
Slowly getting in there. But so for a start, tell us about yourself. Tell us about, and we all know you have a wife and a family, so tell us about your family and everything, and just give us a little info.
Yeah, wife and I got married in July of 2011, so we're 12 and a half years marriage, which is just crazy to think of. Her name's Megan. She's also my full-time admin. We get to work together in the office. Really, really excited that we get to do this together. We have two girls, 5 and 7, Reagan and Layton, and then we have a boy that's on the way. She is 32 weeks pregnant this week.
You got a name drop, or is it?
We don't have a name. We know the middle name and the last name. Last name is set.
Yeah,
it's good to go.
I'm glad you know the last name.
But yeah, no, we're not set on a first name yet.
Oh man, interesting.
So
I look forward to hearing.
Yeah,
I know when we were getting to name, we named our son. I let my wife pick his first name because she really wanted to name him Theodore, and I was like, all right, well, if we have another son, I get to pick his name. She was like, all right, deal. And then we had our daughter, and then she's like, yeah, we're done having kids. And I'm like, oh, so I got gypped.
gypped out of that.
But I did pick Renee's first name, and so with Theodore, I picked his first name. She picked his first name, and I picked the middle name. Renee, the opposite. So this is not about me, it's about you.
Hey, we want to hear about you too. Come on.
Oh my! Our listening audience has probably heard enough about me.
They don't care about you.
Yeah, so I think we're okay. But so, how did you get into youth ministry? When did you feel the call of God in your life, and when did you know for sure that I know this is 3 questions in one, but when did you know the transition was going to happen from being a youth pastor to coming to Iowa? Because I know you were in Florida before, correct?
We were.
So you'd be coming from Florida to Iowa. People probably call you crazy because you go from pretty state to cold, but I'm a cold person, so.
Oh man, no, you're not a cold person. You're a very warm-hearted person. But no,
right,
anyway.
All right, fair enough.
No, stupid dad joke. Anyway, yeah. So, official call into ministry for me, and it was actually like Jesus became completely real to me, and I got my call to ministry all in the same time. Because I was born and raised, grew up in the church, grew up going to a Christian school. I never really knew life outside of the church, but there is a difference in a salvation, an inherited salvation, quote unquote, because we don't really believe in that. You believe it in your heart, you confess it with your mouth, and you will be saved. And so Jesus became real to me on a missions trip. I was 14 years old. We went on a missions trip to the armpit of America, Mobile, Alabama, and literally geographically, it's the armpit of America, and also if you go there, you'll see. Anyway, if you're from Mobile and you're listening to this, I'm sorry, but you know what I'm talking about. You call yourselves the armpit of America, and so anyway, yeah, went on a missions trip there, and man, we just loved on people, served some of the local Assembly of God churches that were there. And it was during one of the evening services that the Lord just spoke to me so clearly and said, "This is what I want you to do." And it was also in that trip that my relationship with Jesus became so much more real to me than what it had ever been before. It was, okay, no, I know who Jesus is. I know who the person of Jesus is. And yeah, it just kind of took off from there. And so having that calling at such a young age, and then having a youth pastor. My youth pastor at the time was actually Eric Hoffman. who is the
yes.
national NextGen Missions director now.
Okay, yep.
But having a youth pastor that also encouraged me and spoke into my life, gave me opportunities to preach at a young age, serving in the youth ministry. I played on a worship team, since I was 12 years old, starting at my Christian school and then playing at the church. And so, just kind of holding on to that, knowing what God had called me to do vocationally, to be a pastor. I mean, we're all called to the ministry in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's you're a doctor, but or a janitor, whatever. You're still called to the ministry. We are all called to make disciples who make disciples, and but outside of that, being called to vocational ministry, just always held on to that all through high school and going through early education or general education of college and whatnot, which I dropped out of that, but
That's okay.
it's because I knew I was called into ministry, and so I was like, you know what, I'm not going to waste my time on this, and so I've learned more now. Now I'm actually I'm currently I am on my way to being well educated, if you want to put it that way.
Nice.
I'm studying for my master's right now, but one semester in, we'll see how this goes. But then we were youth pastors in Illinois for almost 5 years, full time. And I actually ended up taking about 18 months off of full-time ministry, and ran a construction company. My wife actually, the same job that she has now, she had it in Illinois. So she worked for, at that time, it was Eric Hoffman, who was the DYD in Illinois. And so she worked for Eric there in the Illinois district office. I got to serve under him as well in a volunteer role. Helped out with camps and youth conventions and events all across the state of Illinois, did pulpit fill, but then throughout the week ran a construction company and did that for about 18 months. And then the Lord led us to Florida in 2018. And oh man, that was our dream. I mean, we were so excited to get to Florida, so excited to be close to her grandma. Her mom moved down to Florida with us. My wife's grandma and my wife's mom moved down to Florida with us, and so we were living the dream there. And about 2 years in, maybe 2 years and 3 months or so in, we just started getting this stirring of transition, and we were like, Lord, please don't. Like, why are you doing this? And couldn't really explain it. Didn't really know why or what. And honestly, I mean, I had no goals in mind of, I want to be a DYD one day, or I really want to do this one day. I mean, being in the positions that we've had, being able to serve under Eric, we could see now how God has kind of orchestrated that. But we had the dream job. I mean, our church was 1 nautical mile from the Atlantic Ocean. We had Disney annual passes, and it was no snow, no ice. And loving it, and the Lord just started stirring in our hearts. Transitions coming, and so we knew whenever Guy Fisher texted me and said, "Hey, this is Guy Fisher. I'm the superintendent here in Iowa. We're looking for our next district youth director. Would you be interested in a phone call?" And I knew in that moment, all right, Lord, this is it. This is what you were talking about. And so, long story short, I guess at this point,
that's
we
how
were
you
about to
know it
Iowa.
was God, because He called you from there to where you are now. I remember when me and my wife got married, we were in Oklahoma. I literally looked at her. Everybody would ask, "Are you going to move back to where she's from?" I said, "No, we're not."
Yep.
I said, "I am not," because we live in a town called Correctionville, Iowa, which is about 30 minutes from the church. But we live there, and I literally I'm not moving to a place that's called Correctionville, Iowa. And the Lord humbled me very quickly. Of course, we live here now. But
He does that. He does that. We said probably 5 dozen times while we lived in Florida, we will never move back to the Midwest. And the Lord's like, that's funny. You say never, I say get ready.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
It is always ending up to be that, where we're like, I remember my youth pastor growing up, he always said, "Don't tell God where you don't want to go, because it's going to end up being where you're going to go."
Oh, yeah.
And it rang true.
Yeah.
I didn't want to, not that I didn't want to be here. We actually moved up here for different reasons, but ended up getting this job, which was a total God thing. But yeah, So
I've just started telling God I never want to go to Hawaii, and I never want to go back down to Florida. Never, ever, ever, never.
I've visited Hawaii, and I honestly, truthfully don't think I would want to live there, but man, is that a gorgeous place to go
I've
visit.
never been there.
It is amazing. I had a friend that went to college with, moved out there to do ministry, and so when I went, I got a free stay and free food.
Come on.
All I had to do was pay for my flight, and so it was a good spring break. But then it was actually it was right when COVID hit, and so if I would have been in Hawaii a week longer, like if my flight would have been a week later, I would have been stuck in Hawaii for like 6 to 8 months. And
bummer.
I would have evidently lost my job. Probably gotten a job in Hawaii, but didn't work out that way. So one of the biggest questions that I've been going through in my mind, wanting to ask is, there's ever a time in your ministry where it was really hard, like it was a difficult time that you were in, and what was that, and how did you work through it to get out of it?
Yeah, so I mean, I love that in America we're really easy to, like, hey, preach prosperity gospel, you know what I mean? And like, hey, follow Jesus and all these things will be added to you, you know what I mean? And all of that kind of stuff. And I love looking back on our ministry journey and like, just things that we've gone through and been through and heartaches that we've dealt through and worked through and that God has allowed us to go through for growing points. There's hard situations, but in those situations, what really excites me is that God, if you're in a difficult situation, then chances are God's preparing you for something next or something greater. And it might not be transition. It might be a season of growth, or it might be a season, a breakthrough on the other side of it. And so that's one of the things that I really hold true to, because I think anywhere that you go, I mean, even moving here, in an incredible opportunity of a job in and of itself, being a NextGen director or a DYD. It's an incredible opportunity, but coming here, I mean, it's our first time never being around any family. I mean, our closest family is 6 hours away. Moving to a state that we had never been to outside of the interview. I mean, that was our first time stepping foot in the state of Iowa. And so coming here like that was really hard, but we knew that God was leading us, to be here, and we still know even now, just as things progress and you go through tough seasons and you go through breakthrough seasons and you go through developing seasons, and then you go through seasons where you're able to pour out and develop in others. And so that's one of the things that I always hold on to if we're in tough seasons is, hey, this is preparing us for the breakthrough or the increase, or, sometimes it is transition, but, whatever is next. And so that's pretty exciting.
It's cool to see that we kind of have the same story, because moving here, I'm the youngest of 6 siblings, and I'm the first sibling to move out of the state of Oklahoma. Only time I had ever been here was to visit my wife's family twice, 3 or 4 times. And so when we got called up here, my wife, before I heard the Lord tell me, my wife was like, "Oh, I know we're moving." And I was like, I believe you, but I need to hear it from the Lord, because when you hear those words from the Lord, for me that was my anchor, because it's been really hard for us in the season of having friendships, because we're 30 minutes away from our church, so we're 30 minutes away from the people that we could spend time with all the time. And so, and obviously having 2 kids also makes it a little more difficult, but it's just one of those things. It's cool to see similarities in that, how my closest family member is 8 hours away, and so it's cool to see that there's somebody else that understands. So this is a question that I know I preferenced before, but I really want to hear it. What is one of your funniest youth ministry stories that you have? Oh man,
fun. So, one of them is not appropriate, so I won't.
We don't want that one.
That was the first one that came to mind. I was like, nah, I can't share that one, and so this one isn't necessarily a funny one, but it's a story from youth ministry, or really just ministry in a sense, that I hold on to, and I actually use it in some of my, like, whenever I'm asked to speak to college students or anything like that. So whenever I was hired on in our first youth pastorate position, how long are we supposed to go?
Usually
that's
we
cool.
shoot for 35 to 45
Okay,
minutes.
okay. So yeah, in our first youth pastorate, cut that one out. Here we go. So I don't know that I have like the funniest story, because my funniest story is inappropriate and we can't share that.
You can tell me later.
Yeah, we'll talk off air. But I do have one that like I share, like if I go talk to college students or anything like that. And it's funny looking back on it, but it was not funny in the moment. So in our first youth pastorate position, I was I was hired in the spring, and I was put in charge of the fall winter, or the fall festival, which is like several thousand people that comes out and attends this fall festival, trunk or treat, like back whenever all of that was not witchcraft, and so. um, Sorry, was that too?
No, that's perfect.
Was that too borderline for this podcast? Anyway, and so I was put in charge of this, and one of the things, so like I had everything in place, everything was going good, parking went well, the layout went perfect, like everything was set, everything was good. I had the pop-up lights because it was going to be happening at nighttime. I had those ready. I knew that those lights had generators on them, and I knew because of my background experience that those generators would produce enough power, they produced enough wattage and amperage for me to hook up blowers for the inflatables that we were going to set up, that I had literally put out on the map in the parking lot. And so I had two of those generators, and coming into the events, Eric, who he was so really quick before I continue with that, Eric was my junior high basketball coach. Then he was my youth pastor. Then he moved away, and then he moved back, and then I went and served under him. I was a leader under his youth ministry as a young adult. And then he became my boss because I was hired as the junior high pastor and youth pastor, and he was a pastor that was still on staff at the church that we were at. And then he became DYD, and I became the youth pastor over the entire ministry. And so he's always been in my life, and so a lot of my stories have Eric Hoffman in it. But anyway, but he told me right as the event started, and he saw some of the layout and whatnot, and he said, "Hey, we've used one of those generators before, and it pops breakers. And if you plug in a blower into that, it's going to pop the breaker." And me and my knowledge and what I knew is that no, that breaker is, or that machine produces enough power, enough wattage, enough amperage to power these, and surely I'll only plug in the blower to it. I won't plug in anything else, and kind of take a little bit of his advice, but I'll let my knowledge in this moment speak louder than his wisdom. And sure enough, the event starts. We start up the generators, the blower's going. I'm like, yeah, hey, sweet, it's working. Everything's good. And then night fell, and so if you can imagine. This is the largest inflatable right in the middle of the parking lot. Several thousand people around. There like probably 2,000 people are on property. Not even joking. And all of a sudden, as the light comes on, literally light comes on, light turns off. It's like a flash, and then kids start screaming because the blower is out of power because the breaker popped, and this thing starts deflating with 15, 20 kids on top, or inside of this bounce house, and then, but it doesn't end there. My ignorance is bliss in this moment, and so it doesn't end there. So I get all the kids out, and I go, okay, Eric, you were right, can't do that. So then I have about 5 guys grab the entire inflatable and the blower, and we drag this thing across the parking lot, a couple hundred feet. Get it plugged into the building, get the light turned back on, get the blower turned back on. Everything works. It's all good. It's all fine and dandy. To a month later be sent a bill because whenever we dragged it across the parking lot, it pulled holes in the bottom of the inflatable. So it still worked for the event, but it was a several $100 mistake and a lot of embarrassment because all of these kids were being trapped in a deflating inflatable. And from that, I learned one of the most important ministry lessons for me, and that is that wisdom will always trump education. Wisdom always trumps education. And so if someone has gone before you, trust their wisdom before you trust your own education. So
That's
anyway,
I used to actually work at a church that my department was setting up events like that, and so I've had plenty of times where I've been in the inflatable and people shut it off, and that's not a fun
oh
experience.
no, I'm sure we probably should have had some like PTSD bills, like some therapy bills for kids that were waking up from night terrors and stuff that they had because of their room collapsing on them like the bounce castle.
I see a kid laid in his bed. His mom comes in. What's wrong? The bounce house got me again.
Yep, the bounce house got me again. Oh man,
that's hilarious.
yeah. So that was one of the most marking stories of youth or ministry in and of itself.
That's hilarious.
Life, so.
That's so funny. I just keep thinking of the kid in the bed saying, "Mom, the bounce house is coming. The bounce house is coming." Back to a little more of a serious note. What has been like your greatest, like, how do I word this properly? What has been your fondest memory being here in Iowa as the DYD so far?
Oh man, just about any time we get to do like stuff like this is awesome. But oh man, there's a lot. Like genuinely, there's a lot. Like our first camp season, whenever we had dozens of students called to specific places of ministry all across the world, and seeing those play out, like having students like Maddie Grimm, who is like pursuing her call to be a missionary to Afghanistan, and I mean that's just one instance. I mean, moments where like at youth convention where students are able to get up and speak, what God has poured on their heart. Moments where you see students at the altar that when they just get it, and it's no longer an emotional experience for them, but it's a genuine encounter with the Holy Spirit. Yeah. That's why we do what we do. I mean, when students respond to the call of God on their life, we've got a couple students right now who they're actually kind of putting together a collective of students across the state, from what it sounds like, but where these are students now. They're not leaders. They're not. I mean, they're leaders for their generation, but they're not adult leaders, as you will. Where they're literally making themselves available to rural churches who don't have youth pastors to come in and be a resource to those churches so that they can minister to kids in those churches. These are PKs that are being responsive to the call that God has placed on their heart, and they're able to. They've put on several events already, and have already, we've already seen God move in and through that. Pretty incredible. Ethan Jones and Colton Hagen are the two guys that are leading that. Personally for me, some of the favorite things, or like the more emotional things, I guess you could say, is whenever our teams come together. Whenever I say our teams, youth pastors and leaders from across the state that come together to pull off an event like youth convention that we just had, to pull off events like camp, this summer. We're coming into this. We've always said, and I think we've lived this out well, is that this isn't going to be the Ryan and Megan show. This isn't. The DYD is not a pedestal position. We're in the mud.
Director.
Oh, sorry, the NextGen director. We're in the mud. We're in this together with you guys, and we're linking arms, and we're coming alongside youth pastors and even lead pastors who are operating as youth pastors on Wednesday nights, and even and kids ministry. And I mean, we've got Pastor Troy, who is an incredible
he's amazing.
KidMin director, and so linking arms with him, who is also linking arms with kids pastors across the state. That's what keeps me going, is man, like, because ultimately we as leaders, we want to create something or be a part of building something that will far outlast and outlive us. And we only do that by building teams and by building people.
I think my favorite thing a lot of people that watch our podcast know that I came from a church that wasn't an Assemblies of God. I didn't really hardly know anything about it. I think the one thing that I've appreciated the most about you and Megan from the time I started and continuing on till now is, like you said, it's not been about you guys. You guys have always cared about us. You guys have always had us in the mix. And one of my favorite things is just the unity we have coming into this, being in this big fellowship that we have in the state of Iowa. It's kind of overwhelming at first, but having you, your wife, introduce me to people, get to know people, and build that family. Like, there's people I probably never, youth pastors I would never get the opportunity to speak with, if not that we do those every last Monday of every month, doing those Zoom calls, like opportunity to get to hear youth pastors' hearts and stuff like that. And to me, that's a leadership that's easy to follow because I've worked under a lot of different leaderships. I've worked in a lot of different parts of ministry. And so for me, seeing you guys and the way you guys operate, it's one of those things that's it's effortless leadership to follow. And it's something I truly appreciate, because when you have a leader like that, that's willing to, it's almost like a reverse pyramid, like work from, we're the bottom, we're working on making you guys higher up and stuff like that. That's the last youth pastor that I served under before I took this job. That was the way he ran things. And it was just, it's so much more refreshing in ministry to come into a place or come into a position where people don't just care about, I'm so-and-so, that's my name, this is my job title, it's more of, hey, what can we accomplish together?
Yeah.
And let me pick and choose the talents and the abilities, and let's see what everybody can do, and let's come together as a team, like the body of Christ should be, and work together to accomplish a bigger goal than we could ever accomplish in ourselves. And so that's something I appreciate about you guys.
Come on. Well, genuinely, we get to do this.
It's true.
That's where it starts. That's our heart, and that's how we do ministry. And so we're excited to get to do it.
It's just it's a refreshing leadership to serve under. Then you get to a lot of leaderships a lot of the time are like, hey, I'm in charge. Write your ideas on a piece of paper and put them in the box. But you guys are always open to ideas, always ready to go, always there for us. And I don't have to doubt that if I need something, I can text Ryan Yates at 12 o'clock at night. And knowing him, he's probably gonna be up talking about the Cardinals or something.
Oh no, we don't talk about them right now. So them signing another mid-grade pitcher. Anyway.
So if you had one piece of advice that you could give to a young person to encourage them in where they're at right now in life, what would that be?
Yeah. I mean, one of them I kind of already gave away a little bit is wisdom will always out-trump education. On top of that, I would say, so this is just any young person, or like a young person wanting to pursue ministry, or just any young person.
If you got one for a young person wanting to pursue ministry and you got one for any young person, do them both.
Yeah, I mean, regardless, I would say you need to find yourself a mentor, like a mentor that, and I'm not, I've got a friend of mine, Elijah, here with me. He's almost a senior in high school. Are you a senior? No, yeah, I thought you were a junior. Yeah, so he just turned 17 about a month ago, and I'm not saying that I'm his mentor, but because he's got youth pastors and people in his life that are incredible. But it is so important to find a mentor that's willing to. It might not be every once a week or whatever, but find a mentor that can pour into you.
Yeah.
Because again, wisdom will always out-trump education. Yeah. And whenever you can glean off of the wisdom of someone who has gone before you, that's priceless. And so that's one of the biggest things for any young person that I would encourage. First and foremost, love Jesus. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So we're going for more practical, just applicable. But yeah, I'd say find a mentor, and then don't be so worried about seeking after your quote unquote calling. And I'd actually challenge that a little bit in that we are all called, Matthew 28:19. We're all called to go and make disciples. Yep. God will assign you in the right time. Don't confuse. I love Doug Clay actually said this. He said, don't confuse your assignment with your calling. We're all called. You will be assigned to different assignments throughout your life as your life goes. Don't get so caught up in, your junior, senior, sophomore in high school, going into college, whether you're in college, a freshman, sophomore, junior in college. Don't get so caught up in trying to figure out your life and figure out your assignment where you are. Allow the Holy Spirit to lead you and guide you and direct you into that assignment. As long as you trust, yes, he has called you. Respond to that calling as a disciple of Jesus. Respond to that calling in your relationship with him, seeking after him, serving him, loving him, spending time with him. Respond to that calling by being a Christian, being Christ-like, seeking after him in every way. But in that, be obedient when the assignment comes. Don't try to force an assignment before God's ready to give it to you.
Yeah, that's good. I've actually never heard it put that way. That's really good.
From our general superintendent right there.
What a guy.
So, yep, he's pretty awesome.
So, yeah, think that's good. Yeah, I'm good. You good? Anything else you want to say?
I'm good. Yeah.
No, I'm good.
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me. Like, for real, this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I feel like I might have a newfound passion. Like,
dude,
I love just sitting and talking, and this is nice. This is great.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons we started this whole thing was because this is one of the reasons we started this was because we wanted to see open conversation happen. Having open conversation and honest conversation too, because you can have conversation all day long.
Yeah.
But if you're not being honest in your conversation, you're not growing in that conversation is not growing the person you're talking to,
right.
And you're not growing in yourself. And so, having a time where we can have open conversation and just talk and just hear somebody else's perspective. The tagline is bringing hope and healing. That's been our tagline at our church for a long time. And so we want this to be a boat to bring that to our community, to our listeners. We might not get 40,000 listens. We might get 15, but those 15 are encouraged more than were. And it's
going to jump. You're going to get 40,000 followers. They're going to see Ryan Yates on there and click follow. We'll edit that part out, right?
One of the
Thanks, Aaron.
One of the things that's like, it's I don't know. I've totally forgot what I was even going to say. You made me laugh and just but not having honest conversation. It's not. This is driving that boat, and we want to interview people like that have gone through things that have gotten through something on the other side, and be like, this may not be how God's going to bring you through that, but this is a story to show that, hey, if God did it for somebody else, he'll do it for you. He's no respecter of persons. He's not going to heal somebody and not heal you, he's going to. And so this is just kind of the ship to kind of get us there.
Let me throw this last thing out there just as we're continuing to talk here, but I just feel in my spirit to just impress anybody who may listen to this in the future. But if you're in ministry and it is coming at the expense of your family, I want to encourage you to make a transition, make a shift, because ministry is never supposed to be at the expense of your family. What I mean by that, let me give you a quick example. So, in our first ministry position, and there's been healing that has taken place. There's been me and the lead pastor of that church. We're good. So all of God has worked healing in that. But the reason we stepped out of ministry for 18 months is because I was actually working side work in addition to working full time at the church, just to keep food on the table and keep bills paid. And our daughter was born in August, and I was working a job. And came home one night in November, and my daughter, just a few months old at that point in time, was terrified of me because she didn't recognize me. And I looked at my wife in that moment, and I said, if this is what ministry is, I'm out. And my perspective of ministry was flawed in that moment because I thought, me as the man, I've got to be the provider. I've got to take care of everything, and I wasn't trusting God to be the provider of that. And so I would just encourage you, if ministry is coming at the expense like that, that's what I'm talking about, the expense. God called me God assigned me to move away from my family, as you would say. I'm not saying that type of expense. I was losing my relationship with my 3-month-old daughter. And I know that God never designed ministry to be like that. And so stepping out of that, allowing the healing to take place, shift my focus of my assignment, my calling, my job, refocus and realign all of that for more how God created it to be. It sets you up for such a healthier success of ministry as God created it to be. So,
Yeah, I've actually never told anybody this, but there's a point when we first got here. It was probably 8 months after we got here, so. My wife had just had our second child, and it wasn't actually she hadn't had our kid yet. It wasn't any postpartum depression or anything like that, but she was just miserable. And I just remember I looked at her and I said, she was just like, I feel so lonely. And I was like, well, what do you mean? She's like, we don't have anybody around us. She's like, I know I have you. I know I have our son. I know we have my family, but she's like, we don't have any friends. And in that moment, I looked at her and I said, you are my number one priority. I was like, I understand God's first, but nothing at this church, no student at this church comes before my wife or my kids. And I looked at her, and it was at a point where I was like, do we have to move back to Oklahoma? Because I was at the point where I would have rather have done that to make sure that she was happy, that then she ultimately, and we obviously went in that moment and prayed and talked about it and talked everything out and worked everything out, and to where we obviously stayed because we're still here. But it was just one of those moments where I told her, I said, this job is not more important than you. And it was a moment I had to be very honest with her, and because at that point she didn't really know that. I didn't really express that with my words, but I expressed with her, like, if we have to do something where I step out of this job is not more important than you.
yeah.
This job is a blessing. It's an honor. It's a blessing to be able to serve these students. It's a blessing to be able to speak wisdom and speak passion and speak all this stuff into these students' lives and be there for them and see those spark moments, those moments where it clicked. That's great. But my wife being happy and my relationship with my wife being healthy and all that has always been, that was my number one thing when I went out into ministry, that my mentor told me was, your wife comes first. My mentor was the one that did our marriage counseling before we got married, and he said, Scott, you're about to live a lot of life in your first year of marriage, because we got married, honeymoon, got pregnant with our son. That was October. That next June, we moved to Iowa, and we had a big move, had a baby, and started ministry.
Yeah.
And it was those three big transitions, and the whole time, it was just one of those things. It was constantly playing in my head. She's first, not ministry. She's first.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I tell Pastor Aaron here at the church all the time, when I leave here, I leave my laptop here. The only thing I take home with me is my phone, because I don't bring work home. Because when I get home, realistically, I get home at 5:30. I have about an hour and a half to 2 hours with my son before he goes to bed. And I don't want me to be like, oh, I have to finish this thing for work, or I have to write this sermon. I'm like, the sermons will get written, the work will get done. I will never get those moments back with my kids.
Yep.
So that's just always been
So
my
true.
point of view on that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So true, man. That's good. Good stuff.
That's a deep subject.
We get to do this.
Yes.
We have to be husband
Yep.
and dad and mom and wife.
Yep.
We have to do that. We get to do this, but that we have to do.
Yeah. Priority number one.
Yep.
That's also been one of my favorite things about we get to do this. It's just switching your mindset. Like Pastor Johnny, he doesn't say this maliciously or like but he's like, oh, we got to go pray. It's like, oh no, we get to go pray, and he's like, you're right.
Yeah.
It's just switching that mindset of, oh, we get to go pray, we get to do this stuff, and so now every time we get to go pray, every time he's
Come on.
there. And so it's just one of those things that's really cool to see that switch of the mindset of, oh man, I got to preach this Wednesday. No, I get the honor of doing this Wednesday.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So good, man. So good. Well, thanks again for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks for that little
It's been good conversation. Yeah.
Thanks for listening, and be sure to follow Restoration Podcast on Spotify and Apple. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe.